I always knew Jonathan kept secrets, but I never imagined one of them would be shaped like a folded piece of paper, left half stuck under the lip of his leather wallet. It was thick paper, clinical, government sealed. At first, I thought it was another clearance memo, another travel itinerary stamped "Do Not Disclose," like the dozens he casually tossed on the kitchen counter after each classified summit. But when I flipped it open, my breath caught. Diagnosis: condyloma acuminata, genital warts, primary transmission, sexual contact. No further explanation, just cold, clinical truth. For a moment, the world stopped spinning. Then it tilted. I gripped the countertop like it might keep me from falling into the black pit that opened beneath me. The date on the paper? 2 days after he got back from Nevada, from what he described as a defense think tank weekend. Right. That closed-room strategy gathering at that eco-silent retreat with no phones, no cameras, no trace. One of those ESG-bundled PR escapes where tech moguls and old politicians sip on mushroom tea and discuss how to fund Patriot missile shipments through climate grants. I used to laugh at how absurd it sounded until now. He came back from that trip different, quieter, sweatier at night, twitchy. I chalked it up to the usual post-diplomacy crash, the kind of moral hangover he always carried after those high-stakes networking weekends. He never told me what exactly happened inside those rooms. He couldn't, he said. National interest. He said, "We don't even write it down," he once whispered. But something changed after Nevada. And now, the paper. I didn't confront him right away. I couldn't. I'm not proud of it, but I did what any wife living on the bleeding edge of Washington privilege does. I dug. I called Nicole, the one friend I had who worked with Capitol Hill staffers. I didn't tell her everything, but I asked about Jonathan's circle. Who'd been at that ESG silent thinkin'? She went quiet for a moment, then texted me, "If I tell you, we never speak of this again." What she sent me wasn't a list, it was a screenshot from an internal RSVP roster labeled Project Whisper Cell. The names, oh God, lobbyists, ex-CIA assets, one senator, 2 hedge fund guys who were under sealed federal investigation just 6 months ago, and Jonathan, right there in the middle, marked Asset Liaison Class C, Soft Target Diplomacy. I stared at that term, soft target, until the letters stopped meaning anything. That was him? That was what he was now? Not a husband, not a man, just a liaison between money and power, flesh offered for leverage, no trace diplomacy. I remember sitting in the dark that night, listening to him in the shower, wondering who had touched him, wondering what he had done in return, wondering who else's DNA still lingered on his skin. That night, I didn't sleep, and that's when I began remembering. The girls. Not women. Girls. The ones I saw briefly once when I picked him up early from a backdoor fundraising dinner at the Glass House in Arlington. They weren't on the guest list. They didn't swear name tags or speak loudly. They sat near the bar, glowing, mostly Eastern European, one maybe Latina, and dressed in white. They didn't look bored. They looked prepared, like they'd been trained to expect rich men, like they were part of the decor, curated for pleasure and silence. Jonathan saw me see them. He smiled and kissed me like nothing was wrong. Now I know everything was. The day after I found the diagnosis paper, I pretended to clean his home office. I waited until he left for one of his briefings in Langley. The man kept nothing on his desktop, nothing in drawers. But the trash? The trash was honest. Inside a crumpled paper bag were 3 things. A tiny black velvet pouch with the logo of a wellness clinic in Vienna, Austria, a torn envelope with a crest I didn't recognize, but later Googled. It was Epstein Family Trust, London branch, and a printed itinerary marked Private Air, no manifest filed. Depart Las Vegas, arrival Maxwell AFB via hushpad clearance. And I, like an idiot, had thought he'd been in Utah that week. I didn't need a private investigator. I didn't need a voice recorder or lipstick cam. The truth was already rotting in our garbage. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know, you can't unknow. I kept the act up for a week. I kissed him goodnight. I played the wife. I packed his travel bags. I even ironed his favorite tie, the one he wore to donor dinners, the same tie he left on the hotel floor of the Four Seasons during the 50-51 fundraiser last month. But something in me shifted, because I, too, had secrets, and I was tired of playing the clean one. You see, I knew what went on in those rooms, too. The girls didn't just serve drinks. Some of us wives, were invited to. Not as equals, not as spouses, as civil bridges. We were encouraged to soften the conversation, to keep the billionaires entertained while the men discussed arms, offshore accounts, and vote-flipping algorithms. Some of us went along. Some of us drank just enough to forget what we said yes to. Some of us never forgot. My first time was in Santa Fe, under the guise of a climate equity panel. I was told to wear green. I was told to smile. I was told the man I'd be seated next to would be sensitive to female warmth. His name was Mr. Graves. That wasn't his real name, obviously. He had a scar near his collarbone and eyes like burnt glass. He never touched me, not until we were in the soundproof suite where no phones were allowed. That room smelled like lemongrass and chlorine. It was colder than expected. I was told afterward that I had helped diplomacy, that my presence had secured a mutuality clause in a $2.8 billion ESG mining rights contract with a third world government no one dared name in public. I was thanked. I was paid through a fake travel reimbursement fund. And when I came home to Jonathan that week, he didn't ask where I'd been. He just poured me a glass of white wine and said, "We're doing good work. Don't think too much." So I stopped thinking, until the diagnosis paper shattered the silence. Now I remember everything, and I'm going to find out what else he's hiding, even if it burns us both to the ground.
He always had that briefcase, matte black. No brand, no scratches, no tags. Just a worn leather handle and a biometric lock he pretended was just standard. I never asked what was inside, not because I didn't care, but because I was taught not to. Wives like me, we weren't supposed to ask. We were supposed to smile through fundraisers, shake hands with wives of senators, keep our dresses steamed and our mouths sealed. But now that I knew, now that I saw the paper, now that I remembered everything from Santa Fe to Zurich, I couldn't stop seeing that briefcase like a casket of secrets. He carried it differently after Nevada. Before, it was routine, part of the costume. After, he cradled it like it contained something alive. And I began to notice things, like how he would always leave it in the downstairs study for exactly 7 minutes before bringing it up, as if he needed the house to settle, to make sure no one was home, or listening, or watching. That's when I placed the mic. It wasn't high-tech, just a voice recorder embedded in a fake phone charger. I plugged it into the wall near his desk one morning before my yoga class. I told him I'd be gone until lunch. I wasn't. I parked 2 blocks away and waited. He came home 15 minutes after I left, right on cue. The playback was grainy, his footsteps, the soft click of the lock on the briefcase, the rustle of paper. Then silence. 4 minutes of nothing. Then a single sound, a whisper, male, not his voice. I played it 10 times before I heard it clearly. They know about Maxwell. Leak confirmed. London is preparing the rotation. File under Omega Green. My spine tingled. Maxwell, Epstein's partner, the one who supposedly vanished after her sentencing. I had read every theory, that she died in prison, that she was in Argentina under UN escort, that she was in exile trading secrets for immunity. But this sounded real. And rotation? What did that mean? Witness rotation? Power rotation? Or something darker? And what was Omega Green? I didn't tell anyone, not Nicole, not even the burner forum I sometimes visited where wives like me traded encrypted whispers. This felt bigger, more dangerous. That night, Jonathan came home late. He smelled like mint and anxiety. I watched him undress. He paused before removing the tie I had ironed, the one with the faded bloodstain behind the knot. He never saw me notice. "What was today?" I asked softly. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It was briefing on climate index debt, Just noise. Noise. That was his favorite word for everything he didn't want to explain. I nodded. Need a drink? He hesitated. Actually, can you pour me something? I'll be upstairs in a sec. That was the moment. I went to the kitchen, pulled out 2 glasses, opened the Glenlivet we saved for Christmas, and poured exactly 1 shot into his. Then I added 3 drops of something I wasn't proud of. Microdose truth serum from a South African defense contractor's spouse, gifted to me during a luncheon in DC. The label called it chamomile concentrate. The side effect? It made powerful men say quiet things out loud. He took the glass without suspicion. He always did. He didn't collapse. He didn't even slur. But an hour later, lying on our bed, staring at the ceiling, he whispered, "They paid for this silence with girls." I froze. Who? I asked, careful. The ones who wanted access to the ESG switch. The fake ones. The ones funding oil pipelines through green startups. They needed proxies, signatures, noise. So they gave the Pentagon comfort girls and called it diplomacy. My name's on it, Claire. I didn't touch them, but my name is on it. I didn't cry. I just breathed slowly. And the disease? I asked. He was quiet. Wasn't mine, he said, finally. It was planted. A warning. A leash. They're showing me I'm not untouchable. My stomach flipped. Planted? What did even that mean? I shouldn't have opened that package, he mumbled. What package? He didn't respond. He was already asleep. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I went back downstairs, I opened the study, I stared at the briefcase. I knew the lock would reject me, but I tried anyway. It didn't buzz, it didn't blink, it just sat there, dead. But the next morning, it was gone, and Jonathan was too. No note, no call, just a missing man, a missing case, and a growing storm in my chest.
Jonathan was gone for 3 days. No texts, no calls, no GPS pings from the secure numbers he used. I even tried Nicole, the one person who'd always pick up, and for the first time, she didn't. Instead, I got her voicemail, cheerful, naive, like nothing in the world was wrong. I called the Office of National Security Liaison, the agency he sometimes briefed with, under the Department of Strategic Partnerships. The woman on the line didn't sound surprised when I asked about him. "I'm sorry," she said with a plastic voice. "That name does not appear in our public registry at this time." Public registry. That was code. He was either underground, contained, or erased. I sat on the kitchen floor, knees drawn to my chest, and stared at the faint outline of his coffee mug ring on the marble counter. It looked like a moon. Pale, perfect, hollow. That's when the email came. Subject: Remember Vienna? No message body, just an attachment. A video file labeled IMG Omega Green 0001.move. I stared at it, unmoving. My hands trembled. My first instinct was to smash the laptop shut, toss it in the sink. But curiosity has a cruel rhythm. Once it taps, you dance. I didn't open it on my main machine. I retrieved an old travel laptop Jonathan had given me years ago, back when we were still pretending we were just a finance couple. I booted it without Wi-Fi, disabled the ports, and ran an offline decoder. Then, I watched. The video was only 37 seconds long, but it shattered everything. The setting was familiar, the mirrored lounge inside Hotel Les Jardins in Vienna. I had been there. The ESG Climate Harmonization Summit, the one Jonathan said wasn't technically political, but had strategic funding implications. The room was supposed to be secure, phone-free, light-scrubbed, no feeds, no traces. That's what they said. But someone had recorded it. In the video, there were 6 men sitting on a circular velvet sofa. 2 of them I recognized immediately, a U.S. senator and a tech billionaire with a known crypto laundering scandal. The others were less clear, but one wore a ring I had only seen once before, on Jonathan's left hand during a dinner in Santa Fe. The Council of Civic Reciprocity. A ring. a fake nonprofit that funneled money from defense contractors to ESG shell firms. And me. I was in the video. I was standing by the piano, dressed in emerald green, sipping from a glass of Prosecco, laughing at something whispered in my ear by a man who would later be indicted for trafficking election data through a non-existent climate platform. I looked relaxed, comfortable, complicit. The video panned, handheld, discreet, like someone recording secretly from inside their coat. Then the camera paused on Jonathan. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't drinking. He was staring at me, like he knew, like he always knew. The video ended in static. I closed the laptop, but the heat of that moment lingered in my skin. Someone had this footage for years, and now they were releasing it to me. Why? Was it a warning? A threat? Or a recruitment? That night, I heard the buzz outside. I peeked through the curtains and saw it. A white van parked across the street, engine idling. No logo. Windows tinted. Government issue, or worse, unaffiliated. Jonathan used to say the scariest people weren't the ones who worked for the state, but those who used it without ever signing their names. I didn't sleep. I just sat by the window, watching, waiting, listening. By dawn, the van was gone, but in its place, left on my porch step, was a manila envelope. No name, just a single phrase scrawled across it in red ink. The briefcase isn't yours. Inside, not papers, just a USB stick and a burner phone. The phone vibrated the moment I touched it. One message. Omega Green is not a file. It's a rotation. You're next. I dropped it. My breath caught. They didn't want Jonathan anymore. They wanted me. I didn't plug in the USB. Not yet. I held it between my fingers, staring at the plastic edges like they might bleed. The message on the burner phone echoed through my skull. Omega Green is not a file. It's a rotation. You're next. I'd heard that word before, rotation, but never like this. In Santa Fe, one of the hosts had jokingly said it over champagne. "We're all part of the rotation now, darling, even your +1. I had laughed then, thought he meant the order of speakers or table assignments. But that wasn't what he meant. He had looked me in the eye when he said it. His gaze wasn't flirtatious, it was cataloging. I showered, dressed, and went straight to the hotel. Not any hotel, the Glen Washington, the one place in D.C. where diplomats, donors, and deviants all shared cocktails under golden light and old jazz. It was a safe haven for those in the know, and, more importantly, it was neutral ground. I went there because I knew she would be there. Maya. She was older, sharper, a former handler. Not a spy, not exactly. She worked in accommodation logistics for state-sponsored NGO liaisons. Translation, she cleaned up diplomatic messes before they made headlines. If anyone could tell me what Omega Green really was, it was her. I found her in the back lounge, drinking something dark and neat. She spotted me before I even made it through the entrance and nodded toward the seat across from her. "No hug?" she asked. "I don't know what's safe anymore." She chuckled, sipped. "Then you're finally learning." I slid the burner phone across the table. It was left on my porch, with this. I showed her the USB. Her face didn't change, but her pupils flinched, just slightly. "You didn't plug it in?" "No." "Good." She leaned back, watching me like she was calculating how much time I had left. "Claire," she said, voice soft, "you were never supposed to see the file." "I didn't." "But you're part of it now." I waited. She exhaled slowly. "Omega Green is not a mission. It's a mechanism. A failsafe. The government didn't create it. The donors did, back when Epstein was still alive. It started as a rotation of favors, access for silence, bodies for votes. At first, it was discreet. Dinners, retreats, private jets. Then it evolved." My throat dried. "Evolved how?" "Into obedience." She looked around, lowered her voice. They realized they didn't need everyone to agree. They just needed everyone to owe, to sin, quietly, in recordable moments.
because shame is louder than truth. So they built Omega Green, a silent carousel of complicity. Every member gets rotated in. A dinner, a girl, a signature, a lie. And once you're in, you never leave. I leaned back. My blood was cold. I didn't know. But you played the part. You went to Vienna. You smiled in the footage. You belonged. That's all they need. What about Jonathan? Her eyes narrowed. He tried to break the wheel. I froze. Maya downed the last of her drink. Then she slid a matchbook across the table. On it, in her handwriting, Silos, 9:15 p.m. Come alone. Then she left. I stared at the empty glass she left behind. Then I looked at the matchbook again. Silos 9. That wasn't a location. It was a code name. I remembered it from a fake ESG fund party last year. They had joked about it being the off-record embassy. It wasn't a place. It was a ritual. That night, I went home and opened a bottle of wine just to stop shaking. I lit every light in the house as if brightness could drown paranoia. And then finally, I plugged in the USB. It took 3 seconds to load. It was a dossier, labeled Omega Green Rot C. Subtitle, Rotation Clearance, Claire T, Primary Substitute, Spousal Lineage. It contains schedules, contacts, photos of me, dozens, taken over years, at events, in lobbies, boarding planes, kissing Jonathan, hugging donors, dancing in Vienna, all time-stamped, all cataloged. And then the final image. Jonathan, tied to a chair, alive, mouth gagged, captioned, uncompliant, under temporary hold, rotation redundant. The screen faded to black. My chest clenched. The room felt like it was folding inward. They didn't just erase him, they were using him as leverage. And if I didn't show up to Silos 9 that night, if I didn't play along, I'd be next in that chair. Silos 9 wasn't on any map. It didn't need to be. Everyone who was meant to find it already knew where it was. That was the first rule of Omega Green. If you have to ask, you're not invited. I arrived at 11:10 p.m. sharp. The driver didn't speak. He didn't look at me. He just waited until I stepped into the black SUV with no plates, then pulled off with mechanical precision. The silence inside was oppressive, the kind that made you feel like speaking might set off a landmine. I gripped the matchbook Maya had given me like it was a lifeline. 27 minutes later, we arrived. It wasn't a building. It was a structure, brutalist and blank, 3 stories tall, surrounded by pine trees and floodlights. No sign, no visible doorbell, just a single keypad embedded into the concrete wall. My driver typed a code, waited for the steel panel to slide open, then nodded once. I was expected. Inside, it was warm, lavishly so. Cashmere rugs, walnut walls, lighting that dimmed just enough to conceal expressions, but still showcased the art. The kind of place where conversations could happen without ever being recorded. A controlled vacuum of trust. There were about 20 people inside. Some I recognized, a former Secretary of Commerce, a high-ranking tech CEO, a lobbyist from the Department of Energy whose name had been quietly redacted from 3 federal investigations. All drinking from identical glasses, all whispering, all smiling like they weren't a part of something that destroyed people. I was offered a glass of white wine by a woman in a green silk dress. No name tag, just a pin, an infinity loop, brushed silver. She didn't say a word, just gestured for me to follow. She led me through a long hallway past glass panels covered in moss and abstract paintings that shimmered under red light. We arrived at a room labeled Intake. Inside was Maya. She was sitting on a leather bench, arms crossed, face unreadable. "You made it," she said. "You didn't say I'd be walking into a cult?" "It's not a cult. It's a protocol." "A protocol that kidnaps my husband?" She sighed, then stood. "No one kidnapped him, Claire. He broke the clause. You know what that means." "I didn't agree to anything." She looked at me like I was a child. "You were married to someone in the rotation. That's all it takes. You lived inside the benefits.
You reaped the access, and now you're part of the guarantee. Omega Green is about continuity. No gaps, no panic. If one asset fails, another steps in. That's the contract. You're the redundancy clause. Where is he? Maya didn't flinch. Safe. For now. I laughed bitterly. What do you want me to do? Smile in another photo? Sign another NDA disguised as a travel waiver? Sleep with another donor who pretends to care about tree frogs while voting to gut wetlands? Her eyes darkened. It's not about sex. It never was. It's about consent optics. About showing the world that power can be beautiful, stable, relatable. You're not here to seduce anyone. You're here to represent trust. A knock on the door. Then it opened. A man stepped in. I'd seen him before, once at a fundraiser in Baltimore, smiling next to a senator under federal investigation. Tonight, he wasn't smiling. He wore a gray suit and an expression carved from stone. He nodded at Maya. She's clean. The sequence cleared. He turned to me. We're activating the Charleston module. You'll be present at the signature alignment next week. You'll sit next to Mr. Keller, you'll nod at the right moments, and when the cameras pan, you'll lean close and say something that sounds personal. That's it. What if I say no? He smiled without smiling. You won't. He handed me a folder. Inside, a plane ticket, a media briefing, and a photo of a hotel suite. The same hotel where I'd seen Jonathan, once trembling in a towel, telling me that diplomacy sometimes gets sticky. I walked out of that room feeling like a ghost inside my own life. And then, right as I stepped back into the lounge, I saw her. Sitting on the velvet couch, laughing softly with a donor from Zurich. It was me. Not exactly, but someone who looked so much like me it made my breath catch. Same hair, same frame, same smirk. A replacement. I turned to Maya, but she was already gone.
The jet was waiting for me at Gate 17, a terminal that didn't appear on the official Charleston International Airport map. It wasn't private, exactly. It was quiet, sanitized. Nobody asked questions. The pilot never introduced himself. The hostess only addressed me once. Miss Taylor, your seat has been cleared. It was a 2-hour flight. I didn't speak. I just stared out the window, watching the clouds fold over the coast like a burial sheet. Somewhere beneath them was my husband, gagged, detained, possibly tortured. And yet I was being flown first class to a gala dinner designed to convince the world that clean energy and shadow diplomacy were somehow friends. The ESG Global Cohesion Summit was held at the historic Nathaniel Russell House, a stunning colonial-era estate draped in green banners, all printed with words like sustainable and equitable. There were camera crews from France 24, Al Jazeera, and a stream team sponsored by Meta's Global Justice VR Hub. None of them knew the building had been gutted inside. No antiques, no staff, no actual press. It was a movie set. The guests were real, but they weren't attendees. They were actors. Powerful, well-connected actors, yes, but actors nonetheless. Everyone had a role. Mine was the whisper, the visual comfort beside Mr. Keller, an asset manager turned climate influencer who once funded a sand mining operation under the guise of desert reclamation. The event was choreographed with military precision. Everyone walked on cues. Smiles were staggered, as were wine pours. When Keller raised his glass, I was to laugh. When the cameras panned, I was to lean toward him. Maya's instructions were clear. Make the world want what you represent. Stability, redemption, progress. I wore an emerald green dress, of course, the same color from Vienna. They wanted continuity, symmetry, a story the public could feel even if they couldn't understand it. The event passed in a blur. Bright flashes, fake toasts, ESG buzzwords arranged like jazz. Behind me, billionaires signed documents that promised emission reductions by 2040 while buying rights to lithium fields in Bolivia. I smiled, nodded, leaned in. And then, during the after reception, as the soft jazz played and diplomats chuckled over carbon-neutral vodka, I slipped away. I had a map. The one Maya had scribbled on the back of the matchbook in Silos 9. She'd left me a single note. Room 14, storage, check the mirror. It took me 12 minutes to find it. The room was cold, industrial, stacked with unused banners and crates labeled Visual Messaging Package D. I locked the door behind me and turned toward the mirror. It wasn't a mirror. It was a screen. Motion activated. The moment I stepped close, it lit up. Grainy footage, low res, time-stamped tonight. A live feed of Jonathan, still tied to a chair, still gagged, but now bleeding from the lip. There was a voice in the background, calm, male. "He moves again, you'll escalate." I watched in horror as a gloved hand reached forward and pressed something against his temple, a small silver device. He winced. The screen flickered. Then another voice cut in, female, icy. "Taylor's playing her part. Continue with phase Omega. We rotate her at next quarter close." The screen went black. Quarter close. That was 2 months away. They planned to keep me, rotate me again, use me until I broke, just like Jonathan. But I had learned something in Vienna, something in Silos 9, something about the way these people moved. They operated like a script, elegant, predictable. The only way to defeat a script was to ad-lib. So I did. I returned to the reception, found Keller. He was mid-sentence with a diplomat from Ghana. I waited, smiled, then leaned in and said, loudly enough for the closest mic, "Jonathan sends his regards. He's almost recovered." Keller stiffened. The diplomat blinked. The mic operator shifted. Just like that, I'd gone off book. Within 20 minutes, 3 things happened. Keller disappeared, escorted discreetly by 2 men in pinstripe suits with Omega pins. I was handed a new drink I hadn't ordered. Maya appeared at my side, gripping my wrist so hard it left marks. "You don't improvise, Claire." I just did. "You don't speak his name." I turned, met her eyes. "I told you to make them believe in trust. I'm just giving them a narrative." She said nothing for a long moment. Then, in a whisper, she said, "You better pray your story has a satisfying ending." I smiled. Then I guess we both need to write a better one. By the time I returned to my hotel suite, my security badge had been deactivated. Subtle, but intentional. The lock blinked red, twice. Not an error, a signal. I waited. Less than a minute later, the elevator dinged behind me, and 2 women stepped out, both wearing Venue Logistics lanyards, both dressed in slate gray suits. No names, no expressions. They didn't say anything, just walked past me and entered my room using a master override. That was my cue. I turned calmly and walked the opposite way, down the stairs, across the maintenance hallway, past the utility exit. I didn't look back. I already knew they weren't there for conversation. My bag was hidden in a service closet on the 3rd floor, inside a recycling bin, duct-taped beneath the lid. It held only the essentials: a burner laptop, an encrypted drive, a scarf, cash, and the backup I had prayed I'd never need. A red rotation file labeled Red Rotation. I hadn't made it myself. Maya had, a long time ago. She once told me, "Everyone thinks you fight corruption by standing outside it, but sometimes the only way to kill a virus is to infect the host with something stronger." Back then, I thought she was talking in metaphors. Now I knew better. The red rotation file was an internal Omega Green exploit, a log of backdoor metadata from previous rotations, voice samples, retinal scans, travel manifests, and most importantly, discrepancies, people marked as attended who were actually dead, ghost signatures, overlaps, all hidden in plain sight. If leaked, it would implode the system from within. But I couldn't just upload it anywhere. Every server was monitored, every cloud watched. I needed real air-gapped delivery, a human handoff. That meant finding someone off-grid, someone who didn't exist in Omega's chain. That's when I called him. No name, just a code name I'd heard whispered in Silos 9. During a poker night between 2 Swiss bankers and an AI procurement chief,
I heard it whispered, the canary. He was a leak broker, a rumor turned real, someone who lived between states in burned-out nodes of ex-intelligence networks. If he chose to work with you, you disappeared, but so did the truth you carried. I sent the signal, a photo of the Charleston Monument edited to show one extra column. 30 minutes later, a message pinged on my burner. Water tastes better underground. 1 hour, D6. D6 was an abandoned metro stop beneath Charleston's old financial district, decommissioned since 2012. I made my way there, heart pounding, adrenaline a drumbeat in my skull. I entered through a broken fence, dropped down a service shaft, and walked until the echoes of the city faded. He waited for me in the dark. Hoodie, gloves, no face. His voice was muffled, but calm. You brought the storm? I nodded, handed him the drive. I said, make it bleed. He pocketed it. It's already is. Before I could ask what he meant, he disappeared into the tunnels. I stood there for a long moment, alone, and for the first time in days, I felt something close to power, not the curated kind served in wine glasses at summits, but the dangerous, dirty kind that changes things. When I surfaced, Maya was waiting for me. Not with a gun, with a cigarette. She handed it to me like a peace offering. You found Canary, she said. You knew? I built him. I blinked. You gave me the red rotation file. She nodded. I always intended to, but you had to choose it. That's the only way to break the system, not by force, by will. I stared at her. You used me. I trained you. I didn't know whether to hug her or slap her, but we didn't have time. Her burner rang. She picked up, listened. When she hung up, her face was pale. They've moved Jonathan, she said. Where? To one of the clean sites, Omega Black. I froze. Clean sites weren't prisons. They were vanish points, final destinations. Then we go now, I said. Maya didn't argue.
Omega Black wasn't a facility. It was a process, a protocol, a place without walls, without borders, without names. It existed only in movements, in flight paths that never landed, in conference calls that never ended, in signatures that belonged to no living person. But Maya knew where to start. Puerto Rico, she said. That's where they clean the records. They use a data void on the West Coast, a fiber-dead region they called the Wash. Once someone enters, their identity is recycled into asset carbon. There's no return. We flew in on separate planes, mine under the name Inez Campbell, hers Dr. Eleanor View. Our tickets were purchased using a defunct medical NGO's funds, a slush account Omega had long forgotten. Maya said if we moved fast enough, no one would see the transactions until we were already inside. We landed at 3:37 a.m. By 4:12, we were walking into an abandoned biotech testing campus near Cabo Rojo, surrounded by nothing but salt flats and silence. At the gate, we were met by a man with no ID. He looked at Maya, then at me, then said, "You were supposed to rotate out in 21. Maya answered before I could speak. "She's the override." He let us in. No questions. Inside, it was nothing like the polished silence of Silos 9 or the velvet-deep manipulation of ESG galas. It was steel, cold, empty, humming with machines I didn't recognize. Giant black slabs like server towers pulsed with red lights. "Where is he?" I asked. The man tilted his head. "3rd floor, Unit 7. He handed Maya a black chip. "Use this, but if you breach the chamber, the vault will time out. 3 minutes, then a wipe." We didn't wait. We found the elevator, we rode in silence. My hands shook, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. All the guilt, the shame, the years of being part of something I never understood, it all funneled into one truth. They weren't going to get away with this. When the doors opened, I ran. Unit 7 was marked with nothing but a red triangle on a gray door. No names, no labels. Just dread. Maya slotted the chip. The lock hissed. We entered. There he was. Jonathan. Tied, unconscious, IVs in both arms, heart monitor pinging soft beeps into the cold. I ran to him, tore off the mask, checked his pulse. Alive. Maya. But she wasn't moving. She stood by the wall, staring at something behind a glass panel. A screen. It blinked once. Welcome, Claire. My blood froze. Why does it know my name? Maya turned slowly. Her face had changed. Not angry, not scared, resolved. I'm sorry, she said. I thought I could change it from inside. What? I thought I could steer it, use you as a breach, but the system was never broken, Claire. It evolved. The screen blinked again. Next primary, Claire Taylor. Status, initiating full rotation. Backup asset, Maya View, decommission pending. She looked at me with sad eyes. They never wanted Jonathan, not really. He was the magnet. You were always the payload. I couldn't breathe. They needed someone public, someone believable. You were already on camera, already connected, already trusted. All the ESG optics, they weren't decoration. They were onboarding. You used me. I chose you. I turned, yanked out Jonathan's IVs. Alarms screamed. Maya pulled something from her jacket, a data shard glowing faint blue. If you get out, she said, drop this in the sea. It contains the kill switch code, the one Canary never had, the one even I wasn't supposed to see. Why help me now? She smiled. Because I've been in the rotation too long. Then she pressed her hand to the scanner on the far wall. Glass slammed down behind her, between us. I screamed, pounded the glass. She mouthed something I'll never forget. You're the last unbroken signal. Then she turned, and the room filled with light. I grabbed Jonathan. He groaned, half conscious. We ran. Down the hall, up the elevator, out through the salt flats. A siren blared behind us, but no one followed. By dawn, we reached the pier. I dropped the data shard into the ocean. It sank, without a ripple. Gone. Like Maya. Like Silos 9. Like everything Omega thought was permanent. That was 3 months ago. Jonathan's in hiding now. We live off-grid. I don't use real names, but I write. I tell stories. Ones that sound fictional, ones that slip past censors, ones where people like you read them and wonder, could that really happen? And the truth is, yes. Because Omega Green isn't a code, it's a culture, a system that uses people as symbols and then discards them when the story ends. But this story, mine, doesn't end the way they planned. Because someone, somewhere, is always watching. And now, they're watching me.